Good morning, everyone. Before we dive into the heart of today's message, I want to set a clear intention. This isn't just about motivation, it's about mechanisms, because if you understand the mechanism, you can control the outcome today. I'm going to share 5 daily habits that, when practiced consistently, will quite literally rewire your brain and change the trajectory of your life in 30 days. This isn't theory, this is rooted in behavioral science, neuroscience, and thousands of hours of observed human performance. Each of these habits is small enough to do without overwhelming your system, but powerful enough to trigger what we call compounding adaptation, tiny shifts that build day by day into massive personal transformation. Waking up early and exposing yourself to natural sunlight within the first 30 minutes of your day is not just a lifestyle hack, it's a neurological and physiological trigger that sets the tone for your entire day. The human brain, particularly the suprachiasmatic nucleus located in the hypothalamus, is deeply attuned to natural light. This region serves as the master circadian clock, and it governs a wide range of biological processes, including hormone release, body temperature, alertness levels, and mood regulation. When you wake up and expose your eyes not through glass or sunglasses, but directly to natural light, you're signaling to your brain that it is daytime. This signal prompts a cascade of neurochemical events that increase alertness, elevate mood, and initiate the countdown to your next sleep cycle. Natural sunlight is the most potent cue for aligning your circadian rhythm, which in turn affects your sleep quality, focus, metabolism, and even immune function. The intensity of natural sunlight, even on a cloudy day, far exceeds that of indoor lighting. While a brightly lit keynote one, leverage the power of sleep and wake timing room, might provide 500 to 1,000 lux. Natural outdoor light ranges from 10,000 to over 100,000 lux. Your photoreceptors, particularly the melanopsin containing retinal ganglion cells in your eyes, are most responsive to this type of light. These cells don't contribute to vision in the conventional sense, but they are crucial for sending information to the brain about environmental brightness. That information is used to regulate melatonin in production, the hormone that signals your body when it's time to sleep. Exposing your eyes to natural sunlight in the morning immediately shuts down melatonin in production, making you feel more awake and focused. This same exposure triggers a timed release of melatonin about 14 to 16 hours later, promoting restful sleep at night. So a good night's sleep doesn't start at bedtime. It starts first thing in the morning with light. In addition to regulating sleep and wake cycles, morning sunlight exposure has a direct effect on the production of dopamine and serotonin, neurotransmitters associated with mood, motivation, and focus. Dopamine is particularly important when we talk about sustained motivation and goal-directed behavior. When you get that morning light exposure, dopamine levels rise in areas of the brain such as the striatum and prefrontal cortex. This is not just about feeling good, it's about feeling driven. People who consistently expose themselves to morning sunlight tend to have lower levels of depression, improved cognitive function, and greater emotional resilience. In fact, one of the most effective non-pharmaceutical interventions for seasonal affective disorder and mild to moderate depression is daily light exposure early in the day. And the best part is it's free, natural, and widely available. The consistency of the practice is just as important as the act itself. By building this habit into your daily routine, you're not just improving your morning, you're training your brain to anticipate energy and productivity at a specific time of day. This is how habits become automatic through repeated association and predictable reward. When your brain knows that waking up and getting sunlight means you'll feel more alert, have more mental clarity, and be in a better mood, it begins to crave the process. This consistency strengthens neural pathways and makes the habit easier to sustain over time. That's neuroplasticity in action, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire itself based on your behavior. It's also worth considering how this habit serves as an anchor for other healthy behaviors. When you wake up early and get outside, you're more likely to move your body, avoid doomed scrolling through your phone, and eat a more structured breakfast. These secondary effects compound quickly. Within a week, you might find yourself going to bed earlier, feeling more focused during the day, and experiencing a sense of internal rhythm that makes you feel aligned rather than chaotic. Your stress hormones like cortisol also follow a D-mal cycle, so first thing in the morning ensures that your cortisol levels rise and fall in a healthy pattern. This matters because cortisol is not just a stress hormone, it plays a vital role in energy regulation, immune response, And metabolic function, a healthy cortisol spike in the morning triggered by light exposure, means less likelihood of crashing in the afternoon or waking up groggy and unmotivated. This practice also influences your body temperature rhythm, another internal clock that regulates alertness and performance. Body temperature starts to rise in the early morning hours and peaks in the afternoon. When you expose yourself to light in the early part of that rise, you accelerate and stabilize that curve. This means greater physical coordination, sharper mental acuity, and better exercise performance. Later in the day, everything from your reaction time to your ability to perform complex cognitive tasks is enhanced when your circadian biology is working in sync with the natural light-dark cycle. You become more efficient, less reactive, and more present in your day-to-day life. Practicing 5 to 10 minutes of daily stillness or meditation may appear simple on the surface, but it activates some of the most powerful networks in the human brain and body. In a world dominated by constant input, where our attention is fragmented by notifications, demands, and digital overstimulation, the capacity to be still is more than a break. It's a recalibration of the nervous system. When we sit in silence or engage in a focused breathing practice, we are not doing nothing. We are actively shifting our physiological and cognitive state from one of sympathetic dominance, often called fight or flight, parasympathetic tone, which governs rest and digests. This transition is not just a feeling of calm, it's a measurable change in heart rate variability, vagal tone, respiratory rhythm, and prefrontal cortex activation. These changes have a direct impact on stress regulation, emotional resilience, and cognitive control. Neuroscientific research has consistently shown that even short bouts of meditation reduce activity in the brain's default mode network, particularly the posterior cingulate cortex, which is associated with self-referential thoughts and mind wandering. When this network quiets down, we gain access to a state of present moment awareness. This means fewer intrusive thoughts, less rumination, and greater clarity of perception. Over time, the practice of sitting with stillness, even just for 5 minutes, reshapes the brain through a process called experience-dependent plasticity. Regions of the brain responsible for attention regulation, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, and those involved in emotional regulation, like the amygdala, begin to change structurally and functionally. These adaptations translate into real-world improvements in how we manage conflict, respond to uncertainty, and regulate impulsive behavior. There's also a profound hormonal shift that occurs during brief meditation. Cortisol levels drop, oxytocin and keynote 2. Movement and discipline through morning activity. Serotonin levels can increase depending on the type of meditation being practiced. Even breath focused stillness initiates changes in the balance between oxygen and carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, which affects pH levels and by extension cellular metabolism and energy. These shifts don't just change how we feel, they change how our bodies function at a systemic level. Immune markers like interleukin-6, which are associated with inflammation, decrease with consistent meditation. Brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BEN, a key molecule involved in neurogenesis and synaptic plasticity, can increase. These are not minor benefits. They touch nearly every system of the body, from the endocrine system to the immune system to the cardiovascular system. Meditation also increases meta-awareness, the ability to observe our own thoughts without becoming entangled in them. This is not a philosophical idea, it's a cognitive skill. When we build the habit of witnessing thoughts as they arise, we create space between stimulus and response. This is where real personal power begins to grow. Instead of reacting unconsciously to stressors or emotional triggers, we can choose a more skillful response. This small pause, this moment of conscious awareness, becomes the foundation for discipline, intentionality, and long-term behavioral change. It's no longer about willpower in the moment, it's about setting the conditions that make better choices more likely. The beauty of stillness is that it's accessible. It requires no special equipment, no perfect environment, and no prior training. Simply closing the eyes, anchoring the attention on the breath, a mantra, or a body scan, and observing what arises is enough to initiate the process. The mind will wander, that's expected, but the act of noticing the distraction and gently returning attention to the present is where the rewiring happens. Each time you bring yourself back to the now. You're reinforcing neural pathways of focus, awareness, and emotional regulation. This is mental training in its most refined form over days and weeks. The cumulative effect is enhanced clarity, reduced baseline anxiety, and greater emotional range for those who resist the ideal of meditation because it feels unproductive. It's worth noting that some of the most productive individuals across disciplines, from elite athletes to creative professionals to military leaders, incorporate stillness into their daily routines. The reason is simple: the mind, like the body, performs best when it's allowed intervals of recovery. Stillness is not the absence of activity. It is a deliberate recovery phase that enhances all future activity, just as muscles grow not during the workout, but in the recovery afterward. The mind strengthens during these windows of intentional rest. It's also important to consider that stillness doesn't mean a lack of intensity. In fact, sitting in silence and observing your thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations can be a highly active internal process. It requires concentration, discipline, and a willingness to face whatever arises without flinching. This builds what neuroscientist Dr. Judson Brewer calls awareness over avoidance, a quality that allows us to remain present even when discomfort surfaces over time. This strengthens psychological flexibility, a trait linked to reduced anxiety, improved performance under pressure, and greater overall well-being. When practiced daily, this short period of stillness becomes a core stability point from which the rest of the day can unfold with greater coherence and control. Moving your body every day, even just for 20 minutes, can fundamentally shift your mental, emotional, and physiological state in ways that most people vastly underestimate. Physical movement is not merely about fitness or aesthetics. It's a direct signal to the brain and nervous system that promotes clarity, mood regulation, and resilience. When you engage in even a brief session of exercise, whether it's walking, stretching, running, or any form of deliberate movement, you activate neural circuits that are responsible for attention, motivation, and executive function. These circuits, particularly those involving the prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia, help you sustain focus, make better decisions, and suppress impulsive behavior. That kind of cognitive control is not just useful, it's foundational for building the kind of life that doesn't just happen to you, but happens because of you at a neurochemical level. Daily movement immediately stimulates the release of endorphins, which are the body's natural opioids, as well as dopamine and serotonin, in both of which are crucial for mood, learning, and motivation. Dopamine in particular is tightly linked to the feeling of progress. When you move your body, especially in a way that challenges you, you create a sense of forward momentum, not just physically, but psychologically. That momentum spills over into other areas of your life. You begin to crave structure, consistency, and action. This is why people who engage in regular movement often report feeling more productive and more emotionally balanced, even when the movement is minimal. It's not the intensity that matters most. It's the regularity. The nervous system loves patterns, and daily movement is one of the fastest ways to regulate it. From a stress management perspective, physical activity provides an outlet for the excess energy that accumulates through mental tension and emotional load. When you're sedentary, that energy has nowhere to go. It builds in the body as muscle tension, shallow breathing, increased heart rate, and restlessness. But when you move, you discharge that energy in a way that recalibrates your physiological baseline. The autonomic nervous system rebalances, cortisol and adrenaline levels drop. Heart rate variability improves, which is a marker of a well-regulated nervous system. Even your respiration rate and depth become more efficient, creating a greater sense of calm and control. Its keynote 3, goal clarity and dopamine regulation. Not just about feeling better, it's about being more regulated, which means you're better equipped to face challenges, make decisions, and maintain perspective. One of the most underestimated aspects of daily movement is its impact on neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire itself. Exercise increases the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BEN, a protein that acts like fertilizer for the brain. BEN supports the growth of new neurons, strengthens existing connections, and enhances communication between brain cells. In practical terms, this means that people who move regularly think more clearly, retain information better, and are more capable of adapting to change. This is not about becoming a marathon runner or gym fanatic. This is about creating a sustainable, consistent relationship with movement that tells your brain every day that growth is happening and that you are not stuck. There is also a powerful Hormonal component movement improves insulin sensitivity, regulates appetite hormones like ghrelin and leptin, and supports healthy testosterone and estrogen balance. These hormones don't just affect body composition, they influence energy, mood, libido, and overall vitality. When your body is hormonally balanced, you don't just feel more alive, you become more resilient to stress and more capable of sustained effort. You begin to operate from a physiological foundation that supports your goals rather than sabotaging them. And when your body is in sync, your mind follows. You start experiencing greater consistency in your emotional responses, less reactivity, and more presence. The compounding effects of daily movement also bleed into behavior and identity. When you move every day, even when you don't feel like it, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who shows up for themselves. That identity shift from someone who struggles with consistency to someone who moves no matter what is a powerful foundation for building other habits. You begin to trust yourself more. That trust creates psychological momentum. It becomes easier to eat better, sleep better, and stay away from distractions because you're already reinforcing self-discipline and follow-through on a daily basis. Your sense of agency grows. You begin to see yourself as the kind of person who takes responsibility for their state of being, rather than being a passive recipient of whatever the day throws at you. There is also an emotional release that happens through movement that cannot be replicated in any other way. Emotions live in the body as much as they do in the mind. Moving your body is a way of metabolizing stored tension, trauma, and suppressed energy that words or thoughts alone cannot reach. Even something as simple as a walk can trigger insights, emotional breakthroughs, and creative solutions because you're engaging the bilateral movement of the body, which also stimulates communication between the two hemispheres of the brain. This integration is crucial for emotional processing and problem solving. You don't need a gym or a program, you need a commitment to honoring your biology every day through the basic, powerful act of moving your body with intention and presence. Replacing reactivity with intentional planning is one of the most transformative shifts a person can make in their daily life. Reactivity is the default mode of most modern existence. It's the brain's way of conserving energy by relying on habitual patterns, emotional impulses, and external stimuli to drive behavior. In this mode, we're not truly choosing our actions, we're responding to whatever is loudest, most urgent, or most emotionally charged in the moment. This constant state of reaction places a heavy burden on the nervous system, drains cognitive resources, and leaves little room for clarity, creativity, or long-term thinking. Intentional planning, on the other hand, is a proactive process that engages the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function, impulse control, and goal setting. It allows us to step out of survival mode and into strategic action. The shift from reactive to intentional doesn't just change what you do, it fundamentally alters how you experience time, control, and purpose. Intentional planning creates a psychological framework that provides structure and direction in the face of complexity. Without a plan, the brain constantly scans for what to do next, often defaulting to easy or emotionally satisfying options like checking a phone, responding to messages, or procrastinating on high-value tasks. When we take even 10 minutes each morning or the night before to clarify our top priorities, define our objectives, and visualize our ideal day, we reduce the cognitive load on the brain. This frees up mental bandwidth for deeper work and higher quality decisions. It's a form of cognitive offloading that turns abstract stress into actionable steps. Planning doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it gives us a stable anchor within it. One of the most powerful aspects of intentional planning is the way it creates temporal awareness. It teaches the brain to think in terms of block sequences and outcomes rather than isolated moments of effort. This is a fundamental shift in cognition. Instead of asking, "What do I feel like doing right now?" the brain begins to ask, "What's the next best action to support my goal?" That one question changes everything. It introduces agency. It replaces emotional impulsivity with deliberate execution. When repeated daily, this shift reprograms neural pathways so that discipline becomes automatic, not effortful. The brain becomes familiar with structured thinking and goal orientation. As the new default, intentional planning also builds confidence. Each time you make a plan and follow through, you reinforce a feedback loop between your intentions and your actions. That loop builds self-trust, which is the foundation of sustainable motivation. When people say they lack motivation, what they often mean is that they don't trust themselves to follow through. Planning and execution restore that trust by creating a pattern of alignment And when things don't go as planned, the framework still holds. You can adapt with clarity rather than keynote 4. Replace reactivity with intentional planning. Collapse into frustration or avoidance. It's not about perfection, and it's about direction. This practice also reduces decision fatigue, which is one of the biggest hidden drains on performance and willpower. When your day is unstructured, every moment presents a choice. Should I start this task? Should I respond to this message? Should I check social media? Each of these choices costs energy over time. These micro-decisions wear down your ability to focus and self-regulate. Intentional planning front-loads those decisions. It allows you to allocate time, energy, and attention where it matters most, without having to reassess your priorities every hour. That clarity allows for deeper work, greater creativity, and higher emotional regulation, because you're no longer burning mental energy on low-value choices. Planning is also a critical tool for emotional regulation. When you're clear on your goals and routines, external events are less likely to hijack your attention. The brain, when given a structure, becomes less vulnerable to anxiety and distraction. You create psychological safety through consistency. Knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it creates a calm inner environment, even when the external environment is unpredictable. This state of groundedness gives you the capacity to respond to life rather than react to it. And that distinction between response and reaction is one of the hallmarks of mental mastery. Intentional planning doesn't mean scripting every moment or eliminating spontaneity. It means having a clearly defined framework that aligns your behavior with your values. It means designing your time with intention rather than defaulting to convenience. This design process becomes a ritual that reconnects you with your deeper motivations. It's an act of self-respect, signaling to your brain and body that your time matters and that your goals deserve conscious effort. It also elevates your standards. When you operate from a plan, you become less tolerant of distraction, more discerning with commitments, and more mindful of your energy. The structure becomes a filter through which decisions are made more wisely and time is protected more fiercely. One of the most liberating aspects of replacing reactivity with intentional planning is the way it expands your perception of time. People often say they don't have enough time, but what they usually lack is clarity about how their time is being used. A well-structured plan reveals just how much time is available when it's not being fragmented by distractions or reactive behavior. This insight can be both humbling and empowering. It forces you to confront the invisible leaks in your day, scrolling, switching tasks, responding to non-urgent requests, and invites you to reclaim that time with purpose. Getting sunlight exposure early in the day is one of the most foundational yet often overlooked habits that can radically optimize your mental clarity, hormonal balance, and sleep quality. The human body and brain are deeply synchronized with the natural rhythms of the environment through a system called the circadian rhythm. This rhythm governs nearly every process in your body: your energy levels, your alertness, your metabolism, your immune function, and your sleep-wake cycles. At the center of this system is a structure in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, located in the hypothalamus. This structure acts as your master clock, but it doesn't keep time on its own. It needs external cues called side gears to stay synchronized, and the most powerful side gear by far is natural light, particularly the kind of full-spectrum light present in the first few hours of the morning when you step outside and allow natural light to hit your eyes without sunglasses, not through a window, and ideally within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. You send a powerful signal to the master clock in your brain that it's time to be alert, focused, and active. This signal kickstarts a cascade of neurochemical events. First, it triggers a rise in cortisol, which in this context is not about stress, but about energy and readiness. Cortisol, released early in the day, is what helps you feel awake, sharp, and capable of movement and focus, unlike cortisol spikes later in the day, which can be disruptive. This early morning peak is essential for mental clarity, immune function, and overall vitality. In parallel, early light exposure increases dopamine production in brain regions like the retina and the ventral tegmental area. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation, mood, and reward-based learning. When you get that morning light, you're literally turning on the systems that govern your ability to stay engaged with tasks, feel good about your progress, and maintain long-term motivation. This is not a small shift, it's a biological foundation that supports nearly every other habit you try to build without proper light cues. Your brain's dopamine baseline begins to drop, and this manifests as decreased motivation, poor focus, and even a tendency toward addictive behaviors as the brain seeks out Artificial sources of stimulation. From a sleep perspective, the benefits of morning sunlight are just as profound. The moment light hits those specialized melanopsin-containing cells in the eye, a timer starts in your brain. Roughly 14 to 16 hours later, your body will begin releasing melatonin, hormone that makes you feel sleepy and allows for deep restorative sleep. This means that your ability to fall asleep at night and the quality of that sleep are directly linked to whether or not you received adequate light exposure in the morning. People who struggle with insomnia, fragmented sleep, or daytime fatigue often miss this critical step. They may be indoors all morning or exposed to artificial light that simply doesn't carry the same intensity or spectrum as natural sunlight. As a result, their circadian rhythm drifts, their sleep-wake cycle becomes inconsistent, and their body's internal systems fall out of sync. It's also important to understand that this is not about just standing near a window or turning on bright indoor lights. The lux level or brightness of Keynote 5. The power of morning sunlight exposure. Indoor lighting is usually between 301,000 lux, but outdoor morning light, even on a cloudy day, can easily range from 10,000 to over 100,000 lux. This difference in intensity is what makes the signal to the brain so unmistakable. Just 5 to 10 minutes of outdoor exposure in the early morning can begin to realign your internal clock. If the sunlight is indirect, or if the sky is overcast, you may need closer to 15 to 30 minutes, but the principle remains the same. Get outside, get the light into your eyes, and anchor your physiology to the natural world beyond its neurological and hormonal effects. Early morning light exposure also has significant impact on mental health. Studies have shown that increased exposure to natural light is associated with lower rates of depression, reduced anxiety, and greater emotional stability. This is partially due to the dopamine and serotonin systems being activated, but it's also because light impacts mood-regulating structures like the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. The psychological benefits of this habit accumulate quickly. People report feeling more emotionally regulated, more positive, and more in control of their responses throughout the day when they begin consistently exposing themselves to early light. Incorporating the habit into your life doesn't require a radical change. It can be as simple as stepping outside for your coffee, taking a short walk around the block, or sitting on a balcony or porch where the light can reach your eyes directly. It's not necessary to stare at the sun. Just be outside with your eyes open and unshielded for a few minutes, allowing the ambient light to do its work. Over time, this simple act begins to rewire your internal rhythms. Your energy becomes more predictable, your mental clarity becomes sharper in the morning hours, you begin to feel sleepy at the right time in the evening, and most importantly, your sense of alignment with your own biology deepens, which makes every other behavioral change easier to maintain and more effective over the long run. Limiting screen time before bed is one of the most strategic decisions you can make to enhance cognitive performance, emotional regulation, and overall physiological recovery. In the final hours of the day, your brain and body begin a shift from wakefulness to sleep, a process that is hormonally driven and highly sensitive to light stimulation and behavioral cues. When screens are present during this period, phones, laptops, TV, they emit a type of blue light that disrupts the production of melatonin, in the hormone primarily responsible for initiating and maintaining sleep. This disruption doesn't just delay sleep, it changes the quality and depth of your rest, which in turn affects your performance, mood, memory consolidation, and immune function the next day. The impact compounds over time, resulting in a chronic sleep deficit. Even if you're technically getting enough hours in bed, when blue light enters the eye, particularly in the evening, it activates specialized cells in the retina, known as intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglia and cells. These cells are directly connected to the brain's master circadian clock and signal that it's still daytime. In response, the brain suppresses melatonin in release, and the body delays its transition into rest and repair mode. Even small amounts of light exposure, such as checking your phone in a dark room, can produce this effect. This means that the presence of screens within the hour or two before bed can physiologically mislead your body into thinking it's time to stay alert, not wind down. As a result, you may experience difficulty falling asleep, disrupted sleep architecture, or waking up feeling unrefreshed regardless of sleep duration. But it's not just the light, it's also the content. The nature of screen-based activities tends to be stimulating. Social media, video content, And emails, news, games, these are not neutral inputs. They engage the brain's dopaminergic system, flooding the brain with anticipation, novelty, and reward signals. This keeps the nervous system in a state of heightened arousal at precisely the time it should be downshifting. The brain interprets this stimulation as a signal to stay alert, and in some cases even prepares for potential threat or action. This overactivation results in shallow, fragmented sleep and a lack of the deep, restorative phases, especially slow-wave sleep and REM, that are essential for emotional processing, cellular repair, and memory consolidation. Reducing or eliminating screens before bed allows the parasympathetic nervous system to activate fully, the branch of the nervous system responsible for rest, digestion, and recovery. In this state, the heart rate slows, cortisol levels drop, blood pressure stabilizes, and the body shifts into a regenerative mode. This is when growth hormone is released, tissues are repaired, and the brain undergoes vital housekeeping functions through the lymphatic system, which flushes out toxins accumulated during the day. These processes are not optional, they're foundational to long-term cognitive health, metabolic stability, and emotional resilience. A powerful part of the evening ritual is not just removing screens, but replacing them with behaviors that signal safety, closure, and decompression. Activities like reading a physical book, journaling, listening to calming music, taking a warm shower, or practicing breath work provide the nervous system with cues that the day is ending and recovery is beginning. These cues work in tandem with the body's circadian rhythm to gently guide Keynote 6. Digital discipline and nighttime recovery you into a state of deep rest. Over time, these behaviors can become habitual triggers, what neuroscience calls conditioned responses, that help you transition more easily into sleep without effort or resistance. Behavioral momentum plays a major role here. The way you end your day sets the tone for how you begin the next. When your evenings are dominated by overstimulation, the morning often begins in a state of reactivity, grogginess, or distraction. But when you establish an intentional boundary, such as turning off screens 60 to 90 minutes before bed, you allow your body to cycle through its natural wind-down process. This creates a state of calm that carries over into morning clarity. People who follow this protocol consistently often report improvements not just in sleep, but in mood, decision making, and impulse control throughout the day. They also notice reduced cravings, better energy regulation, and increased emotional availability, all of which are byproducts of higher sleep quality and better nervous system regulation. Modern digital environment is designed to keep us engaged for as long as possible. Infinite scroll, push notifications, autoplay features, these are not accidental design choices. They are engineered to capture and hold attention using the brain's reward pathways. When you make the conscious decision to disengage from that loop in the final part of your day, you're not just protecting your sleep, you're reclaiming your cognitive agency. You're training your brain to tolerate stillness, to settle without distraction, and to reconnect with internal cues instead of external triggers. This builds discipline and internal stability, which are foundational for executing on long-term goals, maintaining focus during periods of uncertainty, and regulating final thoughts and call to action mood during emotional challenges. Sleep is the only time the brain gets a full reset, and that reset is deeply influenced by the choices you make in the 2 to 3 hours before your head hits the pillow. By reducing screen exposure in that window, you're aligning your behavior with your biology. You're telling your body it's safe to let go, safe to rest, and safe to restore.